Hey, tolerators, this is Natalie, and I'm just here with some quick updates that we've made recently to the podcast and our Patreon. You're going to want to follow the link in the show notes and in all of our bio information to our Patreon, where we are running a free trial on all three tiers. That will get you access to bonus episodes, bonus content, and most importantly, our new series, the Misogyny Meltdown series. That's where you'll find the video for our Misogynist of the Year awards and other episodes and content where I am helping us all spiral about the misogyny we live in. All of that information is in our show notes, and please make sure that you're following us on Men I've Tolerated Pod on Instagram, to All the Men I've Tolerated Before on YouTube, Natalie K124 on Instagram and TikTok, so you never miss any of these updates. Enjoy the episode, and I will see you next time. Hey, tolerators, this is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie Katona, your weekly look at everyday misogyny. Today, we have one of our favorite guests back, Ellen Moore. Ellen hosts. Hi! We get so excited because we very rarely get to do this because an ocean separates us.
Yes, it does.
Ellen hosts The Slut Show with Ellen Moore, and she's going to be talking to us about how ADHD can affect your sexuality. And I've already said this, but it's written in the intro. I'm so happy to have you back.
I'm so happy to be back. I'm so flattered to be there again. I'm so excited.
Yes, you're one of my favorite people to collaborate with, and you always have such depth in what you want to be presenting on.
Thank you. I'm just loving.
So, are you comfortable with telling us about how you got diagnosed with ADHD, how you came to realize that there was something going on, and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. So I was technically speaking, this starts when I was really, really young. I remember being 7 years old or something, and I was seeing a doctor because I had stomach congestions and I had headaches and I had all these kinds of issues that, looking back at it, were primarily related to the abusive situation I found myself in. And then the doctor said something along the lines of, he saw me and I was in there for 5 minutes and he was like, I want to test her for ADHD. And my one of my caretakers responded immediately saying, no, we're not going to do that because she doesn't have it. And that was it. That was all that was said about ADHD. Fast forward to 15 years later, I am having a conversation with a friend of mine. I was, I think, 22 at the time. I'm 24 now. And she said, Ellen, do you think that you may have ADHD? And I knew her as my one of my the very few examples of a person with ADHD in my surroundings, and especially one of the very few women I knew with ADHD. And although I related to some things that she described, her type of ADHD is just so different than mine, and her presentation predominantly is so different than mine. So I felt like, nah, I don't think so. I mean, perhaps. And so we began doing some tests, and she was like, girl, I think you got to talk to somebody. And she began naming things, and I said yes to every answer I should say no to if I wouldn't have ADHD. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I should talk to somebody. And so I began to talk to my GP, and it took a really, really long time for me to get referred to the right place. And it took a lot of persuading my caretakers that I may actually have ADHD and that it is not just a manifestation of my traumas. And when I was finally referred to the right place, they were like, yeah, girl, you got rage and ADHD. So
you done got it. You got it.
It was such a reassurance to finally hear that, yes, I have ADHD. I'm not crazy. I just have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
And there's so much self advocacy that goes into getting an official diagnosis.
Outrageous. It took me 2 years, like, okay, let's not over exaggerate, but a solid 1.5 years to get a diagnosis. That's fucked. You shouldn't have to. And like the amount of promoting, like the thought of, okay, maybe it's ADHD, I had to like persuade caretakers into even referring me. So it's just outrageous. And that really has so much to do with sexism and with the way the healthcare system is created by and for white cis het men, and that is a situation that is maintained because of the way healthcare providers take care of these women and the way they do not take their complaints seriously and the way they do not refer them even though they are specifically requesting these referrals. It's outrageous. It just pisses me off.
I was sharing with you before we recorded that I had recently shared with my father that I have PMDD, and he, of course, had no idea what it was. And as I was explaining, like, I go, it means that when I'm on my period, my body has an allergic reaction to my hormones. It's like I get the flu once a month, my depression tanks, all of it. And he went, so what's the treatment for that? And I went, oh no, we don't treat that because it's a lady disease. And why would we?
We don't got no treatment for things that women struggle with, right?
Why would they ever look into my hormones? That would be silly. And my sister like backed me up. She's like, oh no, we don't get things for that. Like we
just suffer. We suffer.
We just take a handful of Midol and hope it does the trick.
Right. 100%.
And I've had, and it comes from my grandma and my mom passing it down to me, but I have like no tolerance and no patience for being at the doctor and then just having it like lead to nowhere.
Right. And it's, oh my God, it drives me nuts because like ADHD for me means having no patience. And then when you are required to have so much patience, it is made impossible. Oh, fuck. It is made impossible for us to seek diagnosis, to get treatment. Everything is just made so incredibly hard. And, that all boils down to the world being created for men, but more importantly, for neurotypical people, not for neurodivergents.
I was having a hard time because within the last 2 years, I officially got diagnosed with depression. So I could be put on depression meds. And when I mentioned, I was like, hey, there might be ADHD sprinkles in here too. They were like, well, we'll put you on Wellbutrin. It usually helps with ADHD symptoms too. And I was like, so no diagnosis, just a pill, but whatever. And so,
oh my God.
You have to go in for like your normal checkup and they ask you if your depression's getting better or worse. And I was like, I don't know how to measure this.
Right, of course.
They're like, have you had suicide ideation? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me look back through my text messages and see when the last time I told Stephanie I was going to throw myself from the roof was, and whether or not it was serious or if Taco Bell got my order wrong.
But that is not at all an accurate measure for like how bad is your depression. And also like depressive symptoms, but depression in and of itself is such a frequently recurring comorbidity for ADHD. As a matter of fact, 70 to 75% of people with ADHD also have another psychiatric disorder, and depression is one of the most common ones.
Right. And I think it's because we're always hitting highs and we're always hitting lows. And then for those middays, I'm like, I believe that middays are like the days where I've disassociated and watched something on TV for 18 hours. Like, what a middle of the road day. But finally, a nurse told me, she was like, stop trying to think of your entire lifetime. Chunk it. In the last 2 weeks, how many times have you felt really low? In the last 2 weeks, how many times have you made a joke about crashing your car into a tree? In the last 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, that should be on the jump. You guys should just give me a chart that I can rank every day out of a score of like 5 or something. Because the more I can document, but the more that's easy for me to document, the more I can verbalize what's going on. Because when I wake up the next morning, it's a whole new day. It's a whole new round of symptoms.
It's gone. Yeah.
It's gone.
And that's also the thing, memory problems are inherent to ADHD. So people with ADHD always have memory problems. And because they manifest in so many different ways, it's hard to say. A lot of people think, oh, I don't have memory problems because I remember what I ate on Monday, September 1st in 2003. But those are the random things that you remember because of your ADHD and your hyperfocus. But the actually important stuff is gone most of the time. And as well, so you already have problems memorizing things, and then on top of that you have constantly changing moods, and so it can literally, you can feel like complete shit 1 second, and 5 minutes later you feel on top of the fucking world, like you're gonna conquer this shit. So it makes so much sense that it's really hard for you to also track that, because depression is such a complex thing, and especially when it comes together with a disorder like ADHD.
Yeah. And then on top of all of that, we have to be like sexual beings who are trying to date.
Mm. Right, girl.
And it just feels like the odds are stacked against us because I'm like, well, if it's not the pills that are lowering my sex drive, it's for sure my mind.
Yeah, 100%. Girl, tell me about it.
Well,
Fuck.
tell me some of the things that you started to notice or you started tracking and looking into once you kind of got into the ADHD flow of it and getting the diagnosis and things like that.
Right. So when I got my diagnosis, the first thing I thought was, fuck, I'm not crazy and I'm not stupid. Great. Great. That's a lot better than how it felt before. Getting my diagnosis was also kind of a fuck you to somebody who was at the time very close to me and who told me, you definitely don't have ADHD. Stop over exaggerating and stop, self diagnosing. But if it's made practically impossible for us to get a diagnosis, then self diagnosis is the only option remaining. So I highly recommend you to look into it yourself and to, yes, self diagnosis isn't a diagnosis, but still, it can help you get an official diagnosis, and it can help you so, so much to know, hey, shit, that might be it. Because if healthcare providers are failing repeatedly, consistently, you got to do what you got to do. And so realizing that, oh, I'm not crazy, my brain just works differently. I just always have too little dopamine to function the way neurotypical people do. That made so many things click. It was really a lot of pieces of the puzzle all of a sudden fitting into one another. Let me put it like that. And I began thinking, I was like, okay, so if it is hyperactivity and inattentivity, then how does that manifest sexually? Because I am always, when I'm having sex, I'm thinking of what groceries I need to get, the laundry that's still in my washing machine. I'm thinking like, oh, my coming is taking too long, and then I get obsessed with that, and then I think, oh shit, I should moan because I enjoy it, but it doesn't come naturally anymore because I was just thinking about my groceries, and oh shit, I should have brushed my teeth. Should I do that now? No, enjoy it, Ellen. So it's this constant train of thoughts, and when I observed myself from like an outsider perspective, kind of, I realized the only option for those trains of thoughts during sex, that has to be correlated to my ADHD. It has to be.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Because I think a lot of the time when I think about my experiences with self diagnosis or even talking about my ADHD, people are just like, no, you just have a problem not doing what you don't want to do.
Oh my god. I will scream at them for you.
I will say that when I do not want to do something, I will drag my feet. Like yesterday, I had to record a very long episode because it was with Elizabeth and Darcy, and we just treat it like a sleepover whenever we're recording. It's 3 hours of audio, and I got to cut it into an episode. And I had that in the back of my mind as I like took my morning walk and did my morning writing. And then I was like, well, I'm going to go pick up the groceries beforehand because once I sit down, that's it. My day is over. Well, then the neighbor was walking his dog and the dog was like posted up, like, are you going to say hello to me? And I was like, of course I'm going to say hello to you. I'm avoiding work.
Right, right, exactly.
But there's also things that I really want to be enjoying, like the ending act of Hades Town and the last number, but I can't focus on anything except for the seat is digging into me weirdly, and I can't move past that.
Right. I think that may also be The problem with structures and everything is also very much related to autism. I think we spoke about it just now, briefly before recording, and having autism makes you that much more likely to also have ADHD and vice versa. So, and there are also a lot of overlapping symptoms, right? It's called neurodivergence for a reason, and that also means autism and ADHD and dyslexia and dyscalculia and some other things that I cannot name from the top of my head because I have ADHD and thus I have inherent memory problems. But well, right, it's so relatable.
And then, not that, what am I trying to say about this? Sexuality historically hasn't been about female pleasure in a very good while. We're still fighting that fight. So to be sitting there just being like, try to enjoy yourself, even though no one's helping you enjoy yourself. And you're like, I could be watching TV right now. And now I'm replaying the TV show in my head. And I've had men tell me before, like, Natalie, you don't even look and or make a noise at me while we are intimate. And I'm like, oh, didn't even realize I wasn't doing the
Was I supposed
thing.
to also do that?
Let me put on the performance of my life next time.
I think that a lot of things that come natural, like making sounds, yes, it comes natural, but if I give in to making sound, other parts of my sexual performance, let's put it like that, are gonna suffer at the cost of making those sounds because the only way I can do that is by completely caving into the experience and enjoying fully, but then I'm not gonna also be what bothered by how you're doing. And if you're enjoying, I'm just gonna enjoy because the only way I can enjoy is if I focus on enjoyment only. And I can only I can only let go and like actually make those sounds of enjoyment if I know that I'm not disturbing anyone and my flatmate isn't home and she isn't coming home, coming brunch. And like I'm not disturbing neighbors and the window isn't open, but then shit, it's gonna get hot. So, oh my god, it's complicated, right?
It's complicated. And then again, I think that what we see with neurotypical brains versus neurodivergent brains, not that I could even like pinpoint what neurotypical looks like anymore, is you're able to in the moment just like compartmentalize, like, and just focus on the thing. And I used to think that I was so good at compartmentalizing because I could be told something horrific and immediately avoid it to like continue out my workday or something and be like, I'll just cry on the way home. It'll be okay.
Right. Jesus Christ. I yeah, it's night and day. The difference is so fucking massive.
Well, and I think that part of the reason, and I actually know that part of the reason that I started to actually understand how my neurodivergence worked and was affecting my daily life is because of the pandemic and because I got to take a break from capitalism and other people's expectations of me.
Right. Yeah, I relate to that so much. For me, one of the biggest coping strategies is just completely diving into work and doing nothing but work. So I noticed that for me during the pandemic, all I did was work, 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 work. I was also like a full-time student at the time. Theoretically speaking, I still am, but well, that's not it's that. But I was like actively, going to school, writing papers, doing assignments and whatever. And I was also, hustling my business and like launching the slut show and everything. And for me, that was a way to not have to pause and not have to rest and not have to stop and relax because relaxing is what is that? It's such a foreign concept to me. Relaxing? How does that work? I've never heard of that at all. What? Is that a thing people do? God, teach me.
Well, I have such a warped definition of relaxing because, and I think it's like how my parents viewed relaxing. It's like you're sitting on the couch, you're watching TV, no one is speaking to you, and no one wants anything from you. But in like the year of 2023, when people can be texting you all day or whatever, it's really hard to be like, was I relaxed? Did I even enjoy that? I will sometimes build myself up to be like, well, I want to paint today and I have an idea, of what to paint today, but it's so much work. And then when I sit down to do it, I'm like, oh, this was the most meditative thing that I could have done today. And my brain immediately made it work. And that's how dating feels now.
Oh, fair.
Yeah. I was writing in my journal this morning that I had a dream last night about like being in love. And I was like, I haven't even considered trying to do anything that would lead to falling in love in forever because my brain no longer computes it as like a priority.
Fair, right? You got so many things that you're doing at the same time that like I relate to that so much. God, what even is that?
Yeah.
Love? What?
And I just feel like when I was in my early 20s, it was a hyper focus. It was like, I have to be on all the apps. I have to be going out with someone once a week. I have to sit there for the 2 hours that I believe a first date should take, even if I'm miserable or hating it or they're creepy. And and then I started to decenter men and misogyny from my life. And then I was like, okay, well, now I have to try new things and try to date new people, but I'm kind of in a conservative area of the country. And then when it just became hard, I was like, it's not a priority and I'll focus on anything and everything else.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, you gotta set boundaries somewhere, right?
Yeah. And it's just so funny when I think about it, I was like, I wouldn't even know if I was falling in love anymore. I wrote a blog post about having crushes and I was like, I can't remember the last time I had a crush on someone where I was like,
Mm,
ooh, what would it be like to share a life with them? And then make up a bunch of information about them in my head.
right. Right. Oh, that's so interesting. I think we talked about it every episode that we did together thus far. But it's very interesting that our recordings are always scheduled on such a pivotal moment in my dating life. So the first episode we did together, just met like the man I would eventually have a relationship with. The second one, I was in a relationship with him. The third one, I had just broken up with him. And now episode number four. Yesterday, I ended my situationship.
Good for
And I
you.
was crying on the phone with my friend, and she was like, "What do you have planned tomorrow?" And I was like, I have a podcast recording. I'm excited though." And I just stopped crying for a second. I was like, "Oh, that's funny." And so I told her that story of like how the the podcast recordings were scheduled, and she was like, "Okay, that's a good story. You got to tell that." So here I am doing exactly that.
No, I love that because you always bring so much of your personal experience into it. So, the situationship, what happened there?
Oh, girl. No, well, it's uh, what happened there. I had been seeing him for like months and months. I think we've been on and off since like February. And this is recorded in October, and so like, well, how many months is that? 8-ish, I guess. A pregnancy worth of
Yeah,
a situationship, almost. Um, it was great. It was great while it lasted. I liked him a lot. I think he liked me a lot. I loved him for sure. He couldn't love me in that way because of the things that he's been through, and I just felt like we had to come to like a point of saying, okay, either we're gonna like have casual sex, or we're gonna be in a relationship, or we're gonna not do anything at all. And neither one of the two options that I preferred were an option for him. So that's fine. We can move on. We can go our separate ways, and I will always fantasize about the nasty sex we had.
yeah, for sure.
And if that works for him, then it works for me. And I'll get the fuck over it. I'll be
Do
fine.
you find it easy to have situationships? Because I do not. They become like my
No,
hyper focus.
it's always a disaster. Honestly, this was the first situationship that went well for such a long period of time.
Hmm.
For I think the first 6 months straight, we just hooked up and called every now and then and texted like daily for sure. And that was it. And that was great. And it was very personal and very loving and very nasty in a very good way as well. But it never like developed into something that either one of us were like unhappy with or unsatisfied with. And I think that my codependency issues kind of got in the way of that and kind of made me want to pursue things more in a more serious way, even though rationally I knew that would most probably never work anyways, but I wanted to give it a try, and then he did too because he's a people pleaser. So, um, yeah, I think a lot of my unhealthy patterns surfaced through that, and it made me realize how much I have to work on alone. And I'm very glad that I had those realizations, and I also improved my communication skills in the bedroom and in like any relationship, because no matter if you call it a situationship or a relationship, every relationship you have with people around you is a relationship, right? So it brought me so much clarity and so much insight into me as a person, and I think that goes for him too. So I'm just very grateful that it happened that way, and it was a much more loving situation and predominantly end of it than the one I described in the previous
Yeah.
episode.
Well, that's almost how except for ending loving and in good terms, that's almost how my last situationship went, where it's like when we were together, I was so good and I was so happy. And I was like, this is the best decision I've ever made. And then he'd leave my house and I'd be like, well, I wonder where he is. And I wonder who he's talking to. And I would just get myself into this place of like anxiety and panic. And people were like, 2 weeks ago, you didn't even like him. Like, I didn't like my situationship for a year leading up to him, like, pulling out all of the stops to making me want to sleep with him and, like, meeting that goal. They're like, just like 2 months ago, you hated him. Like, you would actively say, like, I don't know why we invite him places. He is, in fact, the worst. And I was like, but now he's my dopamine and adrenaline rush. And I don't like not knowing when I'm getting that the next time.
Yeah, I get that. That's a very familiar pattern for me. I feel like for me with like this situationship, it was more of like seeking validation and filling up the whole my insecurities and my childhood traumas left. I only had, looking back now, I've only had codependent relationships because codependent relationships are all I've known my entire life. In friendships, in like the way my caretakers treated one another, in the way um like most people in my life. And I mean, codependency is such a frequently recurring issue that a lot of people are unaware of. And so when you begin learning about that, you will certainly recognize it around you a lot, and especially when it's something that's so familiar and that's more familiar to you than a healthy kind of relationship. God, it's so hard to break loose from that.
Yeah. And once I started seeking treatment and talking to my therapist more about my codependent tendencies, again, my brain works in extremes. So I was like, well, if I'm not going to be codependent, I'm just going to be very toxically independent
Right.
and decide that I'm not building a life with anybody, or I'm not letting anyone in this house, or if I have the flu, I'm not going to like let groceries be dropped off or anything like that, because I wouldn't want anyone to think that I'm falling into my old codependent habits. And I was like, well, no one knows my codependent habits but me, but I'm so scared that people are going to be like, oh, she's back on it.
It's the all or nothing ADHD mindset, right?
Yeah. And I feel that way with situationships where it's like I went into this fully agreeing that this was not going to be anything serious, but you used like boo language one too many times and treated me like your girlfriend, and now and now my head has decided that I am your girlfriend. If only you could just like hand, like you're on your first Bumble date and you just like hand a card and you're like, this is how my brain works. So watch out, I guess.
Right. Oh man, honestly, I just began sending people I'm dating. I just began sending them episodes on my podcast because
Yeah.
it's just so much easier. Especially like we just put out an episode about ADHD in women, and then we put out a second episode about ADHD and sex, and that I think just like the ADHD and sex one is going to be the one I'm going to send to people from now on, because it explains so much about how that works. And also, like, something that a lot of people don't know is that the inattentive traits of ADHD can also cause a lot of relational intimacy, because a neurotypical partner can often think that the continual wandering of the mind looks like emotional detachment. And that led to a partner survey of partners of people with ADHD, which found that 30% of non ADHD partners felt no connection when having sex with their ADHD partner, as if their ADHD partner was not there. And that is like very similar to what I just described of like being able to make sound, but then not being there anymore, or well, like it looking like I'm not there while I am the most there you can possibly get me.
Well, and it makes sense because so often, like I was at drag brunch on Sunday and I had made the joke a week prior on one of our episodes of Still Comfy where it's like, I will go to drag brunch. I will be in a Halloween costume. I will be fully enjoying the drag queens and the music and everything. I go, and I will be ignoring all of my friends because I'm too focused in on singing with the drag queens and dancing and looking at them. And we went to the Taylor Swift Eras concert and my friend was injured. And she told me, and she is neurodivergent too. So she called me and she's like, hey, um, I know that when you're on your hot girl shit, you're on your hot girl shit and the rest of us do not exist. I am kind of worried that you will just take off in the city of Chicago and forget that I have to walk slowly. And I was like, and you know what? That is a thing that I would, I would do it. And a lot of the time, my family or my friends haven't been able to hang with it because they're like, you're selfish, you're self-centered, you're whatever. And I was like, no, my brain just like literally gets into that flow state. And I truly do forget that other things are happening. And it has had an impact on my dating life because, I mean, I've gotten the feedback before where it's like, I just really thought that you were into me. But then everything about the way you would socialize or the way that we had sex or any of it, you weren't into me. And I was like, oh, no, my body just
Was it
goes,
just didn't look like it?
yeah, my body just goes catatonic when I'm having a good time. It turns out, I don't know.
Right. But being called selfish and self-centered and everything is something that is so common for people with ADHD because that's the way we cope, right? When you always have too little dopamine to filter out the stimuli that enter your brain, it's kind of like I always compare it in terms of numbers. If, for example, a neurotypical person would get like 100 stimuli from like being in the exact same situation that a neurodivergent person is in, then that neurodivergent person is going to get 1,000 stimuli. But the problem is, we can no wait. Let me rephrase. The neurotypical person gets 100 stimuli, the neurodivergent person also, but the neurotypical one has the dopamine to filter out 99 of them. We have the dopamine to filter out about one. So you got to deal with either 99 stimuli or just one, which is a massive fucking difference, of course. So it makes sense that we look uninterested, unbothered, like if we're not paying attention, yada, 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 that we look selfish because we're trying to deal with those 99 stimuli that the 98 ones you do not have. But it's just a matter of our brains working differently and we can enjoy things as much. It just looks different on the outside.
And there are things that will help me focus and take me out of it. And music is one of them because you're getting so many stimuli, like just taken care of through the act of listening to music. But it's so funny at that Eras tour, my friend ended up going twice and she didn't disclose to another friend that she was going with me first. And this other friend, when she got mad, was like, Natalie didn't even tag you in any of the posts or her photos because that's how far and deep you two went into hiding this from me. And Stephanie called me and she goes, I don't even have the heart to tell her that you didn't tag me in your post, not because we were hiding things from her, but because your brain fucking forgot that I was there and you didn't care that I was in your pictures. And then I went back through my post and I went, aha, I did tag you in a picture. I'm not toxic and I'm not selfish. I did tag you in one. But it's literally that all the time where I'm like, no, because I'm having such a good time, I've completely forgotten that you might be part of the equation.
Right, right. I get that so much. It's the same with texting for me. I can Oh my God. If I open my phone right now, it's not good. It's not good. There's a lot of texts from a lot of people. I think I have birthday wishes from like 2.5 months ago that I still haven't replied to. Like the other day, I replied to a person who I very much so considered my friend. I just completely forgotten to reply to her. So it took me 2 months to say, hey, thank you for wishing me a happy birthday, which I know it's not something I'm proud of. On the contrary, I feel really, really guilty about it, and these notifications are staring at me constantly. And I know who those open unreplied texts are from, but I just cannot get to replying. The replying is so fucking hard. It's really a matter of executive dysfunction. And so I said, I'm so sorry for not replying. And so she got really pissed. She was like, I think you're ignoring me and you didn't invite me to your birthday. And I was like, girl, I didn't invite you because you didn't invite me and we haven't seen each other in a year and I only invited 7 people. And besides that, I don't owe you an explanation. I'm sorry for not replying. It's not personal. There is like 14 other people to whose birthday wishes I just replied to, and then there's 28 more unread texts that I haven't gotten to replying to. So, you know, I'm sorry. I really am, but this is not something that I'm actively working on it, and that is as good as it gets, really.
Well, I've been keeping my phone on Do Not Disturb a lot because I've been avoiding someone, and my only like surefire way to avoid them is if I never get the notification that they have texted or called me, because I always accidentally pick up my phone, or I always text my or check my text messages or my emails or whatever. So people started reaching out and they were like, "Hey girl, we haven't like heard from you in like 2 weeks, and we were just making sure that you weren't having like a crisis." And I was like, no, I've just been keeping my phone on Do Not Disturb. And because the phone's not buzzing all day long, I forget to actually reach out to other people. Like, oh, I guess I should talk to my other people who I'm not trying to avoid anymore. And it's like, well, because I'm avoiding one person, I had to avoid all of you. I'm sorry. Them's be the rules.
Self isolation is also such a common coping strategy in all kinds of psychological and psychiatric disorders, amongst which depression and ADHD for sure.
Because it's just sometimes it just gets to be too much to handle your feelings plus my feelings.
It's overwhelming stimuli. You're just literally yeah, you're literally cutting out stimuli because you're already getting so many of them. Nah.
It's why I started to go to fun things by myself, because I was like, number one, I don't want to beg you to come. That feels desperate. Number two, I don't want you to agree to come, and then my entire fun time hinges on whether or not you've smiled enough. Like, don't ruin the Garth Brooks concert for me. I wanted to go to this. And people are floored by it. They're like, well, how do you have a good time by yourself? And I go, I just make friends for the evening. I go, that's like the kicker about being charming. If you want friends, you can make friends. And then I go home.
And that's also a very ADHD thing to be able to make friends on the spot because you lack the filters to also like stop your own impulsiveness. So you're gonna talk to people, you're gonna tell them your life story, you're gonna trauma dump on them because that's how you connect. You don't say, "Hey, the weather is nice." You say, "Do you also have childhood traumas?" "Yeah, I do too." "Great, let's high five about it." But that like shapes a bond right away. So it makes sense that like people with ADHD act on that impulsiveness and make friends really easily. Like all the people I know with ADHD, they are like social ass butterflies who always I lose them when I'm partying. I'll find them somewhere like on the other side of the club dancing with strangers we I didn't know until then. So, but you know, it's also a good thing.
And I have more fun with those strangers sometimes because they have no preconceived notions about me or expectations.
Yes, I get that so much.
My dad recently this summer got to see me in my manic pixie ADHD podcast girl mode, where I had made friendship bracelets for this gaming convention he was taking us to. And that's how I was connecting with people and telling them about the podcast and stuff, but also how I was trying to network with people at the gaming convention. So one day I could work with some of my favorite people in gaming. And my dad is, I think my dad thought he was extroverted until he watched me do it. And it exhausts my sister, and I've stopped taking it personally. But he would just stand kind of in the background and watch me like receive this person's entire life story. Then they would give my entire life story, and then we'd hug and be like, "We're friends forever."
Right.
And he's like, "You
Yes.
just met that person 3 minutes ago." And I go, "Yeah, but it's okay because now I have their Instagram and their TikTok, and we're going to DM. I love DMing people." And he's like, "Okay."
So relatable.
But he's like, "Oh," it finally made him realize that, like, this is why I want this to be my career, because it does feed the beast. And it's the one place where, like, my ADHD gets to reign, and that actually makes me the most successful I could be.
Right. It really, I think that for people with ADHD, it's a matter of finding the areas of life that in which your ADHD thrives in a way you can benefit from it. And if that is a way you can approach it, you can really make it your superpower. Honestly, talking about sex, talking about taboos is my complete hyper focus. That is why I started a podcast around it. That's why my hobby that completely got out of hand is now my full-time job that doesn't pay me jack shit. But at least I'm having fun.
We're going to get paid one day. I know it. For sure. Uh, for one thing, you're hitting the pavements every day interviewing people. Some news outlet is going to pick you up one day because you're already doing that work. I just wish that sexuality, mental illness, all of it wasn't so taboo. So then when you're having these sexual encounters and someone has one expectation and you have another expectation, instead of just like sitting in separate rooms and stewing about how whether or not everyone had a good time or presented like they were having a good time, you could just tell them, "Oh no, this is how my body reacts to things."
Right. 100%. Communication is so important, and especially for people who struggle with these kinds of things. But also, did you know that I'm just gonna spill some facts on you? 39% of like this one study found that 39% of male participants and 43% of female participants presented with symptoms of sexual dysfunction. So, sexual dysfunction amongst people with ADHD is so common. And then on top of that, 17% of male and 5% of female participants presented with symptoms of sexual disorders. And just to name a few, it's like orgasmic problems, orgasming prematurely, coping with sexual aversion, experiencing negative emotions during or after sex, sexual excitement problems. It's such a broad scheme of things. It goes from having no libido to having a crazy high libido and everywhere in between. But it's again really all or nothing kind of. And that's that's the whole problem with ADHD, right? It's kind of the all or nothing disorder mentally.
And sex is so important in our culture, and yet it's the one thing that we can't talk about how important it is. So we just like sit here in our dysfunction and we're begging people to believe that we had a good time. The amount of times that I've had to beg men to stop badgering me because I was having a good time, I'm like, "Stop." I go, because at this point, this is your problem. I can't convince you of anything. So if you're insecure, you're insecure.
100%. And also in like treatment for ADHD, sexuality is a topic that is completely denied oftentimes. Like for me, the the first thing I asked my psychologist when I first spoke to her, I was like, "So I have a question. Let's start there. Could it be that I have a really hard time orgasming because of my ADHD?" And she looked at me and her mouth opened and she was like, um, uh, um, I don't know. And then I explained why I thought it could be, and she was like, "Yeah, it sounds like that makes a lot of sense, but I don't know, to be honest. Sexuality is not something we really discuss here in therapy." And I said, "Okay, well, now you know me. We will discuss sexuality." And over the course of like 12-ish therapy sessions, the only times we spoke about sex was because I initiated it. And yes, I initiated it often, but if I wouldn't have initiated it, that link would have never been made at all. And it is outrageous to think that sexuality is a topic that is denied like and ignored consistently in ADHD therapy when our brain is the part of our body that is affected and that suffers the greatest at the cost of ADHD. And our brain is also our most important sexual organ. It's not our genitals, it is our brain, because it's the excitement that goes through your brain, which sends information to your genitals to be aroused. And if you ignore the impacts ADHD has on sexuality, you ignore the fact that sexuality begins in your brain, which, come on, people, that is basic knowledge.
Again, we're such a hypersexualized culture for us to just be like, but why would we look into it? And I think of a lot of it is just because because if you have to put pleasure in the forefront of the talk about sexuality and the like actual functioning of sexuality and pleasure, then you have to take into consideration everyone's pleasure. And a lot of people's pleasure is still viewed as like dirty and toxic and taboo in our culture.
Yeah, and fetishes and kinks and everything are also so taboo still. Like for me, I'm at a point where I speak about all fetishes, all kinks, all taboos super openly. I just it's in my brain it's become so normalized because it's something I'm constantly working on, and I find it really funny that when I speak to people who I've never met or I've only spoken to briefly, who are like completely shocked about the things that I speak about, the things that I have like actual like hours of research conducted on that particular topic. And that when I step out of that bubble of sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all kinds of other taboos, I'm confronted with the reality that so many people have no honest to God clue. And it really breaks my heart because if more people would know how sex and taboos and how this all is intertwined, I really think the world will be a much better place.
Yeah, and then because people aren't used to thinking about themselves within the collective anymore, I think that a lot of people get insecure because my brain will like kind of forget them or kind of be distracted by them. And it's like, well, no, I never stopped caring about you. You weren't in the rotation that day. And like sometimes you have to do the work to put yourself in the rotation. And then I'm right back to caring about you.
If you don't see them, they don't exist. That really is how ADHD works. It's very painful. It's just with stuff like you pick up your keys, you put them down, you turn around, and the keys have disappeared because you don't see them. They're gone, and they weren't where you remembered them to be. But you got inherent memory problems, so that and it's the same for people.
I relate a lot to my mom's dog. My mom's dog, Bruce, is very anxious. And he was a COVID dog, so he didn't have to be like around people a lot. So when I come over to visit, at first he's like, oh, okay, you're here. It's stressful, blah, blah, blah. But then we get like real cool and friendly with one another. But if he does like a 180 or if he leaves a room and comes back into the room, he's like, oh my God, she's still here. And I was like, oh no, I get that. He has to
Right.
reacclimate himself to me. And that's fine.
Why haven't they left? My
Right.
God.
And
Yeah.
he's like, I forgot that you were here. I forgot that you were a person I had to deal with. And I was like, oh, and my mom just laughs about it. I go, he's just reacclimating himself to me. And it's made me the most patient person because babies are like that too, where it's just like when I would come up from the guest bedroom at the Airbnb we were all sharing this summer, and my nephew would look at me and then he'd look at my sister and then he'd look at me again. I was like, his whole brain is like, that weird lady's still here and she's never around. How nice. It's that lady. But yeah, I'm like, no, my brain is just like an over anxious dog brain where it's like I had to forget about you so I could focus on this.
In some areas, people with ADHD really have the executive dysfunction, like the executive functioning of a toddler or a puppy. Really, it's
Honestly,
it's like that. When I see videos of puppies like being distracted by like the tiniest things, I'm like, yeah, that's me. That's me. Actual footage of Ellen Moore. Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's a lot of positivity that the way that my brain functions brings about. Like I am one of those people who can just like easily be swept away by the joy of a moment in a way that I think a lot of people continue to overthink or close themselves off to or something, where it's like, oh wow, you really are having the best time. And I was like, I didn't even have to think about having the best time. I just got to do it.
Right. Oh man, the lows are so low, but the highs are so fucking high.
I know.
That's really like the I don't know how to there must be like a saying in English. I just can't think of it, but like that's the other side of is it the other side of the medal? Is that it?
Other side of the coin.
Coin. Well, there you
Yeah.
go.
You know,
Good enough.
metal works too. But
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like there's a lot of positivity going on, but positivity has to come through empathy and understanding. And if you're only focused on what makes you comfortable and the person not delivering what makes you comfortable, then why would sex be good between the two of you?
Right. Oh my God. This morning, a friend of mine sent me like a reel or something, and it said, I can only explain it to you. I cannot understand it for you. And that was the nail on its head because you're gonna encounter so many people in your life who have the capacity to understand what you're saying, but they are not at the point in their lives where they understand it. They may have the mental capacity for it, but they can only listen to the explanation. The understanding is the part they have to do themselves. And it can be so painful to split ways with people who cannot understand something that is so fucking obvious to you. And that is something that I think that is the major reason why friendships and relationships of all sorts end because there is something that one person does not understand and the other person is trying to explain.
Hit it on the head. And I think a lot of like that could be turned into like, I can be telling you the truth, but I can't believe it for you. Uh, I see that a lot in all of the toxic reality TV I watch, like Love is Blind, where they're begging them to believe that, like, no, you're enough for me. I am actually in love with you. I am committed to this. And the other person is like, no, but I don't think that you are. It is like, okay, well, I can tell you, but I can't make you believe it.
100%. Yeah.
Well, as we round out on the hour, let's go ahead and do our two closing traditions. What do you think is the thing that you've learned the most about how, or the thing that you would want to pass on to others about what you've learned about sexuality and ADHD?
That it is okay to struggle with the way your ADHD impacts your sex life, and that it is so important to communicate your needs, and it is okay to struggle with communicating those needs, but try things, open up conversations, and listen to the podcast I made about ADHD and sex, man. I really think it could help benefit a lot of people.
Yeah. Get information. It's out there. Like, well, it might not be easy to find because of taboos and culture norms and all of it and inherent bias, but look,
And
if
because I
you're
suck at SEO.
right, and the algorithm.
Right.
But if you need information, try and find information. I think the more open and welcoming we are about struggling or not struggling or what makes us happy, what makes us unhappy, the better everything, including sex, could be. What's a manifestation that you want to put into the general collective?
In terms of ADHD and sex or in general?
It can be both. You know that I'll take either or.
In terms of ADHD and sex, I really hope that people begin talking about it more. People learn to communicate more. People seek diagnosis who think they may be struggling because of their diagnosed or undiagnosed ADHD. Learn things, explore what you know, take multiple points of views, stuff like that. And in general, I would say, let's have more orgasms, man. I think that would do a lot of people good.
Yeah. My manifestation, and it's usually the manifestation whenever we talk about things like this, is I just wish the medical side of it would just catch up with us and like actually view women, the queer community, neurodivergent people, and non binary humans with the grace and understanding that we deserve to have medical research back up what's happening in our brains and bodies.
If the pharmaceutical industry would invest the money they set aside each and every day, each and every year to pay off the lawsuits they fight against people who die and who suffer consequences of their meds, if they would invest that money not in those lawsuits, but in doing research on women, trans people, people of color, how all these things affect our being, how they make us function differently than white cis het men, the world will be a fantastic place. So yeah, let's do that, man.
I'm telling you, Ellen, it was a joy once again because it's always a joy.
Right back at you. I love it. I love doing this with you.
I love doing this with you. Tell everyone where they can find you so that they can get more information and more taboo topics from you.
For your daily dose of entertainment, juice, and whatever more, head over to our website, theslutshow.org. And you can also follow us on Instagram at The Slut Show with Ellen Moore. Be careful. We also have a backup page called The Slut Show with oh my God, my Google is interrupting me. I'm sorry. We also have a backup page, which is The Slut Show with, instead of an O, a zero. Be careful that you follow our main page, The Slut Show with Ellen Moore. And you can also follow my personal account at by Ellen Moore on Instagram. Or hit us up on TikTok or send us an email, listen to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform, and enjoy.
And support things like the Slut Show account and everything. So the algorithm starts realizing that people are mature enough to decide what content they should be viewing.
That would be greatly appreciated for sure.
Because
right back to your socials.
And we're at Men I've Tolerated Pod on Instagram and Natalie K124 on Instagram and TikTok. And there was a little ad at the beginning of the episode about our free trial for Patreon.
Exciting.
Well, remember out there, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything you're tolerating, including your brain short-circuiting as it tries to balance all of the things that are stimulating it, while you also have a partner who just wants you to orgasm and wants you to orgasm quickly. Smiles are for joy.
Amen.
Amen.